I'm here from New Jersey.
Okay. The Rambam. Okay, let's start again. The Rambam in the end of Mitzvos 52, the Rambam says that that there's a law of chitun in goyim, to get married to goyim, and at the end he has a discussion which I thought was somewhat amazing, a discussion of kanoim poigim boy, and working with an assumption that kanoim poigim boy must violate the law of loisis chatim. In Mishnah Torah, it doesn't seem like that. In his discussion of loisis chatim and kanoim poigim boy, he also points out that there's a chiyuv koros, and the chiyuv koros seems to be both, according to the Rambam here in Sefer HaMmitzvos, both in Befehesia and in Betzinda, but only on Bo Al Goya. And I thought, which I mentioned last week, that the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos Mechadish, and it could be not so in Mishnah Torah, that the same way he says in Shirish Yudalit that we apply in Oinshin Mashirin by Mrs. Bezdin and by Koros, except for Pesach and Mila. So any time that we'll find the Chiyuv Koros, even Midivre Kabbalah, we know that there's an asshole. So that would explain why he does what he does, and puts and has a discussion of kanoim poigim boy, which kanoim poigim boy is always a chiyuv koros, and so there would be a law of loisis chatim boy. So we did this, and we discussed the relationship to Mishnah Torah in Barichus last week, but the last line of the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvos we didn't do, and I just like to read it to you, okay? Ukeshis ames, when it's clear and known al odom shu bo al goye be'edav asro is chayiv malchus. See, here again, even before we talk about anything, the case in the Rambam is only one-sided, only in the case where Jew is boil, a male Jew is boil a goya. But if the opposite case, there's no malchus, because malchus for loisis chatein is only their chasanas, as the Rambam says before, and the Rambam does an amazing thing. He reinterprets the pasuk of loisis chatein and bitchol loisita and benoy loisita bitchol. That's not a separate isa, as we discussed last week. That many Rishonim learned they're two separate isuim, and no, according to the Rambam, it's only the isa of their chasanas. But in kanoim poigim boy, there's no der chasanas, because it's boil goy, and that's the case of Cosby and Zimri and Cosby. So the Ram says that in the case that it would have been kanoim poigim boy, or there's a chiyuv kores, there's a chiyuv malchus also. Keshes ames al odem shu bo goya be'edav asro, which that's the necessity for malchus. Is chayiv malchus midioraisa. Now, let's take this slowly. Now, I just like to focus because Chaim Heller makes a big deal out of this, and I must say I'm confused. Okay, I'm not confused. I don't think it's right. I'll tell you why. The Arabic word over here of Baal is, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce, Nochach, is Nun Chof Ches. Okay? Now, Ibn Tibbon and Kapach interpreted as Baal. And I would assume that that's a proper interpretation. And this Baal might not have anything to do with Nisuin. I'll explain to you why. And just before I give you the cases, you see, if Baal, the Nochach, by definition means Bias Ishus, then adding a discussion of using the verb, the Arabic verb of Nochach and Nokach, and saying that there's Nisuin and Kedushin is a priori ridiculous, because it's like double talk. Because Bia Nakach is the Bias Ishus. Why do you have to say this? So I found a few places where the Ram uses this Arabic verb, and together he says that there's a Suana Kedusha. Now let's take the cases. Now, L'cheira, even before it started with this, okay, there's a that a boa shif chalufa is chayiv and oshim tolu, okay? So he's in the assay of Ayin Aleph, he says boa al shif chalufa, and he uses nakach. And boa shif chalufa, the lav is certainly bia. It's not bias ishus. The shif chalufa is married to somebody else, or half married. That's whatever, however you want to talk about it. But you can't say boa al shif chalufa that has anything to do with ishus. That's proof number one. Proof number two, in Loisaseh Nun Gimel, which is coming up soon, he says Sheger Amoni Moavi in Boal bin Nisuin. Okay, now Boal Nisuin, if Nakach, which was the verb there, means Nisuin, it's redundant. And he has to be with Adarav, he's Mois of Nisuin, because Baal means a bliya per se, even without Ishus. In Loisa say Shin Samuch, the Ram writes im Boal Acha Hakidusha. In Boal Bas Yisrael Acha Kidusha. Shin Samuch, that is the Ashora of Boal on a Psuadaka. Vim Boal Bas Yisrael Acha Kiddushin is like it. And there it's Nacha. It's on page in Kapach Shin Mem Dalet. So I thought it's pretty clear over here that this is a Pashat Dabir. And the Pshat is because there's a lav, since there's Kores for Ubaal Bas El Necha, as we discussed Barichus last week. So there's a Kores, and there's a lav. There's Malchus Deraisa for that, for the lav. Now, Rab Chaim Heller, and his Sefer HaMmitzvos, on this mitzvah, in Orah 18, he quotes in the name of the Ma'in HaChochma that the Rambam in the Minyan HaMitzvos is not like his opinion in Mishnah Torah, and his opinion there's Malchus on Bia Shaleki Derech Ishus. I'm not sure what he means. Not in all cases, in only a very particular case. In a case of Chiv Kolis Midav Kabbalah. And the Chaim Hella, he suggests no, there's no stira between Sefer Mitzvos and Mishnah Torah, and the proper interpretation of the word nakach is bias ishus, and that's the Ram's talking about. But I would only suggest that from the cases that I brought, it's very difficult to make such a case, and l'cheira here it's a pashat the beer, and he's talking about a beer shaloi b'derech ishus, b'lok derech, and it's not the Ram Mishnah Torah. Okay, that is what I would suggest. And l'cheira, there's a machlokes in Rambam in Mishnah Torah, and it's Sefer Mitzvos, whether the a chorus b'divrei Kabbalah, whether the chorus b'divrei Kabbalah is mechayiv a malchus deraisa, and do you say on chorus b'divrei Kabbalah ein oinshim l'kim masirin? The Ram over here is of the opinion, do you say ein oinshim masirin? And the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah only has malchus for bias ishus. And we pointed out last week, and just leave it at that, that even though the Ram over here is saying that we say by chayve krisis midave kabbalah enonchin kasirin, since the chiv kores is not mafurish in the Torah, you cannot make a separate lav because of this chorus, or in English as the Ram does in general by Birkas Hashem as a separate lav, even though there's a lav there's a kalil by Dayan, he applies it also as a separate lav by Birkas Hashem, but here you wouldn't do that. Okay. And the daze, okay, so he thinks daze, I assume that he means that it requires a certain displayness, you have to work on it. Ukva his boru kol elu hadvorim b'avodah u'b'sanhedrin. Next mitzvah. HaMitzvah sholosh v'chamishim hi shizhilnu me'eschatén b'zichrei Amon u'moyav levad. So there's an Isa of getting married to an Ammoni and a Moavi, but it's only Scholim. Vafilu acha hachnosam bedas. Hachnosam bedas l'chayra means after Gerus. He enters hachnosam bedas is to enter the religion. It means Gerus. Now, this Ammoni v'Moavi is a Kabbalah. Kach kibalnu mishmur Amosi ad Moshe ben Alocho Sinai Ammoni v'Ammonis in the Moavi v'Loi Moavis. Okay, the same. Okay, and it's after Gerus. V'Amar Yisala lo Yovoi Ammoni u'Moavi b'Kahal Hashem ad Olam. Here, there's no deires; it's forever. Now, let's go slowly. Let's go slowly. The Okay, see, it'll be a minute. I'm sorry. Yeah. The question is, when the Ram says over here, Vafilu, the impression that you get is there's some relation to this lav and to the Isa Chitudim Goyim. In fact, the Ram's interesting, and I found it very interesting. The Ram formulates the lav, which I didn't find it in other lavim, as mischaten, the same way he formulates the lav by chitunim goyim. He doesn't use this, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, B'li. He doesn't use this lashon when he talks about other chayvei lav. So I found it interesting that the Rambam says that the lav over here, even by Moavi, Ammoni and Moavi, is a lav of chitum. So, to the best of my recollection, I remember my Rebbe speaking about this. Not about this law. I'm not sure about the law. I'm not sure what context it was. But he basically said that if you medayik well in the Rambam, that there is a chesaron in the gerus of Ammoni and Moavi l'gabe chitu, that kilus nisha goyis l'gabe chitu, and it's very meduik in Rambam. Let me just read it to you. In Rambam, in Perek Yud Beis, the V'chus Yisui Bia, Alocha Yud Zayin, Kol agoyim kulam, כשיסגיירו ויקבל עליהם כל המצווה שבתורה ועבודים שהשתחררו, it's also, הרי הן כישראל לכל דבר, שנאמר, הכל חוקה אחס יהיה לכם, והגר הגור ומותרים להיכנס בקהל מיד. Every ger who's misgayer is mutter to marry a Yisrael or Yisraelis. V'hu sheyisa hagoy o hameshucha bas Yisrael v'yisa Yisrael Yisraeli giores u'meshucheres. Then the Ram says, opposite the Tnai, a shiur in the heter. Chutz me'arbo amamin bilvad, from 4 nations, ve'hem Ammon u'Moav u'Mitzrayim ve'Edom, she'umo Yisraelu k'sheyizgayer echad mehen, hari, listen to this, is very important, hari hu k'Yisrael l'chol dovo, elu le'im bia b'kol. So as far as bia b'kol, as far as bia b'kol is concerned, they're not Jews. That's the Chayil Lashon. Haru ki Yisrael l'chol dovo, elu le'im bia b'kol. As far as bia b'kol, they're not Jews. So it means, legabe chitun, they remain goyim. So then, that's the Rambam's afilu, that the iso kilo chitum goyim is maintained after the Gelus, and it's an Isa Chitun. And that's the Isa Chitun of Ammoni and Moavi. And therefore the Rambam puts this mitzvah immediately after the mitzvah, the Ashara of Lo Yischatim Bo. Very, very good. Okay? So until this point, Mamish, everything is perfect. Okay? Now I have her over. If you recall, we pointed out last week that there's a difference between the Rambam in Mishnah Torah and in Sefer Mitzvos. Who is Ne'esa? What Lo Yischatim Bo? Who are the bomb? The Rambam in Sefer Mitzvos says Kefrim. It means Oiv de Avodah Zorah. However, in Mishnah Torah, he says Goyim. So in Mishnah Torah, I understand if the Isa of Chitun is an Isa of Chitun in Goyim, so if you say that the Gerus has a residue of Goyis, so the Isa would apply to Ammoni and Moavi. But if the Isa is Kefrim, and not all Goyim Nesa, the Isa is an Isa with Kefrim, so what? Because the Pshat is through Gerus, he's not a Kefer anymore? It's very odd. So all I'm telling you, the Rambam, the deal of the Rambam is a Mishnah Torah, and the interpretation of Mishnah Torah is Mistabit, because it's Goy, and there's Nisha Goyis in Ammoni and Moavi. But in Sefer Mitzvos, where the Isa is an Isa of Kefrim, I'm not sure 100% if it works. That's point one. Next, the Rambam here counts in Sefer Mitzvos one lav. Lo yovo Ammoni Moavi b'kal Hashem ad olam. The Rambam learns that since there's one Hashara, one lav, one lo, you always count it, that's Rambam shows chi, you count it as one in Minyan HaMitzvos, unless you have separate malchus for each individual case. Like Ma'aseh Dogon, Tirush V'Yitzro, there's even says, even though it's one lav, Ma'aseh Dogon, Tirush V'Yitzro, but since there's a separate malchus for Dogon, Tirush V'Yitzro, you have separate lav. Here, it's true that if someone's boiled and Ammoni and Moavi, they will get two malchus, but the same way, because Guf Mecholokim, the same way they boil an Ammoni and another Ammoni. So the Chayr the Ram learned you needed a raya from the Chiluk Lavim that not from a separate din of Guf Mecholokim, but Teres because it's separate Ashoras, so there's no raya, so it's one Ashora. The Ramban disagrees, and the Ramban learns that Minyan Alavim, it depends upon the number of the people or the number of things which are ne'asar in the lav. And since the two things ne'asar, it's lo yova Ammoni and yova Moavi. So it's counted twice in Minyan HaMitzvos. Ramban in the Hasogis in shows Chi, Voroi Yoise Vaneus, Shenimna Dvorim Stavinu Bohem, Ad Shenimnau Mehem, Ad Shenimnanu Mehem, Loi Halavim, V'loi Amalkus. The Imkain call on it's the things which are Nasa, not the number of times the Torah says low, or the number of times the number of Malkias there are. The Imkain call Nifrotim Batera, Echod Echov, Niskom Bishmom, Nimna Al Kaponim. They Nimna separately. When you have a lav, which is Kil Kama Dvorim, it's separate lav in Minyan HaMitzvos. So therefore, he says, no Mavushal is two. Al Tochlimenu no Mavushal Bamoyim. Because the two Nifrotim in the lav, so the two lavim. The Esner and Mechir is two lavim. So Dvash is two lavim. V'zulasam shtayim. V'kol shekein ba'amoni amoavi shafilu kfi svarasa shalarav, which he assumes that chiluk gufim would be enough. I don't think the Ram means that. Kfi svarasa shalarav loy shiyimnem achas kmo she'osam mitzvah nun gimel. This mitzvah is nun gimel, our mitzvah. The Ram counts as one mitzvah. Lefi she'efshe ba'amoni amoavi shelo nilka isam shtayim. Lefi she'en gufim muchalakim. But gufim muchalakim is not a chiluk and yet lav the Ram learns. V'im bo hamoini abas Yisrael ubo hamoavi oleho b'shtei hasros af hi lo kishtayim shafilu b'shem echod shoninu Amu loy alteish v'alteish v'hu shoyse chayiv al kol achas v'achas. V'visu b'hem b'tchilu al amoni u'moavi shneim p'tuin. Hisu b'hem b'tchilu al amoni u'moavi shneim p'tuin al bia hashniya ta'asrot trichidei dibo bi'inon. Okay, say it. So the truth is, this will be Negeya, see. Since the Rambam is of the opinion that this an Isa is Chatein, and the lav is a lav of Bias Ishus, so the whole case of the Ramban doesn't really exist. Because is the lady married to the Ammoni, or she's married to the Moavi? She can't be married to both of them. There's no Tfisis Kedusha in one lady for two different men. So there's never a possibility of the case which he's talking about is really not fair, because it's based on his opinion that all Chayvei Lavim are Yisui Bia and don't require Nisuin. But according to Ram the Shitasai, I'm not sure if the kasha is a kasha, because Guf Muchlokim is really not indicative that it's a separate Isa. That's one. And number two, you don't have issues. You can't have issues in two men. So that's what I would suggest to you in the Rambam over here. So that is here. Okay. The Rambam also says, Kloima, okay, now, Vo'oive alav ze seifeg malchus. And here, Kloima, sheger amoni mo'ovi keshebo natach, which we mentioned before, al Yisraelis benesuin. That's Ram Shita, that you need bias issues. This benisuin is also in the Ksav Yad. It's in Bloch and in Kapach. Now, that until now, we're okay. He's like a Shneim Malchus, right? Shneim Malchus, the Ish V'Isha Malchus, the Raisa. Okay. Now, Rabbi side, this is the Kisveyad that we have. And interesting, in the translation of Ibn Eoth, the mashmos is that Yechayiv on Bia without the Sud. Which is, again, he doesn't have the word Nisuin. וכשבו כלומר שגר עמוני מואבי, כשבו על ישראליס לויקה שניהם. So here, is interesting. And I want to really explain this by continuing, okay? And the next thing, okay? So again, we said Klema Shigeh Amoni Moavi Sheba Yisrael is the Suin Loikesh Neim Malchus. So let's forget about email, but according to Kapach's Xaviad, Bloch, and all of them, it's the Suin over here. And the Ram's like that in Mishnah Torah. In Hilchos Sanhedrin, in Perek Yud Tes Halacha Dalet, in the Minyan Haloikin, he says, Ger Amoni, Shenosa Bas Yisrael Uboal, Ger Moavi, Shenosa Bas Yisrael Uboal. Okay. We say that. Two separate cases of Malchus. I don't know if it's a stira. You know, you have the Minyan of Malchus, might be according to the Minyan of Ishim, to do with these Surim. Okay. Now, there's a problem over here. Torah says, Lo yovoi mamze b'kal Hashem. Lo yovo psuadaka b'kal Hashem. Lo yovo amoni moavi b'kal Hashem. So a priori, no one would be machalik and say the difference lo yovo, lo yovo, lo yovo. It should all be the same. And the nusach HaMitzvos in Minyan HaMitzvos by Mamzer, for example, in Shin Nun Dalet, it's loises a Shin Nun Dalet, he's shezer Mamzerim shlo lovol Abbas Yisrael. And the Ram doesn't mention chasnas at all there. He says, Hazhora shehuzeh hamamze milovoi Abbas Yisrael, v'om yisal yovo mamze b'kal Hashem, v'oiv alav zeh loike. So we don't know anything about issues. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So the interesting thing is the Rambam in Mishnah Torah says very clearly, I might have pointed out last week, I don't know, in Perek Tezvov, maybe I didn't, Halacha Beis, that all Chayvei Lavim are dafka derech ishus. And here he seems to say that the beer of mamzer doesn't require derech ishus. So a priori I would have said that all Oyova shouldn't require derech ishus. The Ram seems to machalik over here. So there's a lot of confusion, and the Ram Mishnah Torah is very clear that in all the cases derech ishus. So before we understand the next step, okay, let's assume that there's a chiyuv of beer by itself. But maybe the Ram held that even though the chiyuv in all chayvei lavmis for beer, not derech ishus, like the Ramban, but in Ammoni and Me'ovi, because the shiurim in the gerus, so maybe we should equate the ashara of loyova Ammoni to the lav of leisischatein, and that's the Ram says that the isa is an isa chitun, and maybe that's the Ram does, and he's not like his approach in Mishnah Torah, but he's ready to accept that Ammoni Me'ovi mean hischatein, so it has to be derech ishus. But mamzer, you see, pitzu adaka, and you see others, might be just beer by itself. Now, let me take this further, okay, and explain what happened. So, this is the first step, okay? The first step is we don't know anything. We see a difference between two things, and the conclusion is that maybe the Ram's opinion is that you don't require issues. It's just a lot of beer, like the Ramban. But by those isurim which are tied up with leisis chatein, like loyova Ammoni Me'ovi, require derech ishus. Now, let me show you something interesting. If you look at Minyan HaMitzvos in Shin Dalet, we pointed out the lav of mamzer, ishis hiu mamzerim shalolovo al bas Yisrael. But the Minyan HaMitzvah Kotzer, the Ram says, shlo yiso mamzer bas Yisrael. So it means the Ram changes opinion, and even in the pre-writing Mishnah Torah, writing of the Minyan HaMitzvah Kotzer, he already says that it's an Isa Nesuin. The Ram Mishnah Torah clearly says an Isa Nesuin in Perek Tezvov, Isui Bi Alocha Beis. Echad Mamzer, Shabo Yisraelis, O Yisraelis, sorry, I didn't read it right. Echad Mamzer, Shenosa Yisraelis, O Yisraeli, Shenosa Mamzeres, Kiven Shabolu, Acha, Hakidushin like it. Kiddush like ball, ain't like it. Ball like Kiddush, ain't like it. Mishum Mamzeres, She'ain Lecho, B'chol Chayvei Lavin, Misha Loike, Al Bi'ilo below Kiddushin, Elokoin Godol Ba'amona Kamoshis. So I'm going to make it a little short, but comes the Maggid Mishnah over there, And the Maggid Mishnah says there's a tshuva from the Rambam to the Chachmei Lunil. And the Ram says, and this will be most important for us, that his Mishnah Rishona, at one point he thought that the Chayvei Lavin were for beer by itself without Ishus. And later he changed his mind. And in Mishnah Torah, it reflects his later opinion, and that you require beer derech Ishus. So it's very good. In Sefer Mitzvos, he's of the opinion that you don't require beer derech Ishus, like the Ramban. But Amon Moavi is like the Isa of titchatan, which is an Isa of derech Ishus. And in Mishnah Torah, he's of the opinion that all Chayvei Lavin require derech Ishus. And it means that the Mishnah Rishona of the Rambam is like the Ramban. The Ramban, in Chidush Ramban, in Kiddushin Ein Chesman Aleph, Hodi Amina Moed Rabaye v'Machz Gushos in Kiddush Leboal She'Eloke Avo Mamzeres Unesina L'Yisrael Hadov Yedua She'al HaKiddushin Ein Eloke She'al Ein Kosu Bohen Lav Bekicho V'Al Bia Below Kiddushin Loike Kmo She'Kosu Meforesh V'Tzoveach Lo Yovoi She'hu Abila. Umufurish Nami Perek Elu Nairis, the Akshina Behedya, Ikrab Yitzchak V'chuli V'chuli, goes on this. And then he says, V'adova Poshut V'yodua, V'utzrachti L'krisvoi, V'bnei She'echo Migdola Mechabrim Pachrinim, Kosa B'chiboi. I mentioned the Rambam by name because it's not Lefichvoidai, I guess. Kosa b'chibur she'ein abo al chayvei lavin loike elen ken kiddush v'tol atzmo b'alocha zu mishum she'omer demoide rovo b'almona ulei almo b'shar chayvei lavin ein okay v'loi diktek l'ma she'omru b'somoch v'chulei v'ein otzorach lifnim. So all I want to tell you then is, in a certain sense, in the Minyan HaMitzvos is the Mishnah Rishona and reflects the Ram's original opinion. But even though he's of this opinion, he still accepts the idea that Ammonium Ovi is Dafke Derech Nisuin because it's an extension of the Isa Lois Titchatan. Okay, now, next. That was this. Okay, so I found this amazingly interesting. Now, let's go back. So he doesn't require the suit because maybe he doesn't have this equation, and Loyovoy Amoni Miovi is Poshita Isui Bia. And therefore he says, Kloima, Shegir Amoni Miovi, Yishebo al Yisrael, Loike Shnehem Malchus. And that would be very interesting and very nice. And maybe the Madur Kama of Sefer HaMitzvos was without the Suin, and the Rambam later added the Suin. And the truth is, Mustaba, that he should add it, because even I think in the Ibn Iyad, the Isa is an Isa Chitun. So it still becomes a little bit odd but at least we understand that the Rambam might have equated, like the Ramban, the Yovoi and the Loshen Ba is a Loshen Abiyah by itself. Okay. That is the Slav. Next, the last point in the Slav. Now, let's just try like this. The Rambam is of the opinion that this lav is not noig, bisman hazeh, because bo sancherev will bilbo es umos, and it's based on the Mishnah Yodayim in Perek Daled, Mishnah Daled. Perek Daled, Mishnah Daled. Bo bayom, bo Yehuda, ger Amoni. Yehuda, who was a ger Amoni, we omer the name bebezdin. Omer lahem, ma ani lovo bakol. This is Bo bayom when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was called the Nasi, and Rabbi Gamliel still came to the base medrash. Omer Rabbi Gamliel osa ato. Omer Rabbi Yeshua muta ato. Omer Rabbi Gamliel hakos loim le'yovoi amoni me'ovi b'kal Hashem gam do asiri. Omer Rabbi Yeshua v'chi amoni me'ovi b'mekayimon hein va'ol sancherev melech Ashur ubilbul es kol ha'umois shenemar v'yaseh gvulos amim v'asidoiseihem sheiseh v'orid kabir yoshv v'taima mishum. So what's the pshat? It's called the Porish Mu'ah Porish, as the Ram explains there in Pirush HaMishnah, and also in Mishnah Torah in Hilchos Isui Bia Perek Yud Beis Halacha Chapei. So because of Bilbul Sancherev as Kol Ha'umois, we say called the Porish Mu'ah Porish, and there's no Isa. Now you understand yourself. If a Novi would come and say Otot and point to Yehuda, Ger Amoni, and say you are actually a Ger Amoni, so l'chayra, this certainly would be a lav, and this certainly would be malchus. L'chayra to the whole portion. I just want to say something short. It's really not nogay here, but it's a very interesting observation. The Rambam, if you recall, I think in Mitzvas Kuf Pei Zayin, the lav of the assay of Hachrim Tachrimen, that to kill the Zion Amamin, the Rambam has a long discussion of whether the mitzvah is a mitzvah l'shah, and it's not minyan, or it's a mitzvah l'deis, it is a minyan. He doesn't quote there that he doesn't quote the Bilb of Sancherev. Interesting, in Mishnah Torah, in Hilchos Isui Bia, he quotes this. And he says, Kvar Bilbo Umus. However, when it comes to the mitzvah of Hachrim Tachrimim that the Rambam has in Perek Hey of Hilchos Malachim, Mulchamos, the Rambam says like this. He says in Perek Hey Halacha Daled, Mitzvah say lachrimim lachrim shiva amim shenem hachrim tachrimim. B'chol shebo liyodei echad mehem v'lo. How is there over which we learned recently? Shenem v'lo kol the. Then he says ukvar ovdu v'ovad zichor. So comes the Radvaz and says that Kvar Ovad Zichron lefi shebos hachel v'bilbo es ha'umas. That's the oil. This is Mamash Pella. You wouldn't have to have a discussion in Sefer HaMitzvos, a long discussion, that maybe it's only a shah. The question is, the simple question, and Novi would come and say, oh, this is from Zayin Amami. Is there a mitzvah Hachrim Tachrimo? So I would venture to say no. It's only by Amon and Moav, because it's Bilbo Umois, and it's a question of Polish, Bilbo Polish. But here the Ram says something very new and different. He says, Kvar Obdu v'ovad zichor. So I'm not going to try to explain, how it works exactly. I just want to say that the Rambam, and I'll see this, I think it's, I think it's emes. So the Rambam, I didn't find the Farshim say it. Maybe I missed something. The Rambam is quoting a pasuk in Tehillim, Tes, referring. It says Ovad Zicham, so Shoyim, wherever it is, and all the Midrashim say that it's referring to Amalek that lost a Lovoi when the Kisei will be Sholem. Oh, then it's because of the Ovad Zicham of Amalek. So the Mocha Emche Zech Amalek, it's finished. There's no more Amalek left. So the Ram used this, and all the Midrashim say that Ovad Zichram refers to Amalek, and the Ram says, in the Mocha Emcha, it's considered that there's nothing there left, even though there might be. Okay, that's the way what happens. And Ovad Zichram, if there are very few left and dispersed Bein Umois, the Ram learns from the pasuk there's a separate matter, and that's Ovad Zichram. And nothing to do here. In Amoni and Moavi, it's a heta called the Polish Muba Polish. If there are only a few left and dispersed by no umois, as Ram says, Mitzakuf Peizayin or Kvarovet Zichrom, then the mitzvah is ended. So that's Ramas Machadish, that even there's no chefsa anymore of Zayin Amon. The Uma is finished. There's no more Uma. It's only disparate individuals. There's no more Uma. So Mamela, the lav shouldn't exist, and it should have been a mitzvah l'shah. Komash Malon, that's the Rambam's Machadish, if the tzivui logically, theoretically, is l'deires, but the chefset mekayim the mitzvah is not there anymore. It's a mitzvah l'deires. That's what I would say. Now, let's go on to the next. HaMitzvah ko'arba v'chamishim. He sheis hilnu meharchik zera esov. We have to know why the term zera esov was said over here. Okay. Acha hachnosim bedas. It means after Galus. What's lahalchik? What's a loima? Shanachnu musharim mehalchik chitunam. Now, I just want to be mehalchik chitunam. Second. Yeah, and that's kloima in kapach. Kloima she'onu musharin lebal nisrachek milhischatein bohem acha shenizgayim. So in here, the lab is lo sisayev, v'hu amar yis'ala lo sisayev adomi ki ochichohu. Similarly, we'll find another lab of Mitzri, lo sisayev Mitzri. So here, we'll be Mitzvah Hashem talk about the next week is this word lo sisayev. You should be machik, or you shouldn't be matayev them, or an enmity towards them. A priori, in Pshuto Shel Mikra, we have no idea what this pasuk is talking about. The Rambam clearly says the pasuk is talking about not marrying them. We have to know what the Maisa Isa is, and we'll see that some do say like the Rambam, but there are others that say different interpretations of what this Isa is. We'll have to see and evaluate what the Isa is. Mitzvah Hashem will pick up next week.